So we are live here this morning with Kirsten Smith. Thank you so much for joining me this morning, Kirsten.
No problem.
Kirsten is right now, she's just outside Ottawa. And the reason I really wanted to talk to Kirsten, on the fact that she's a fascinating woman, is the fact that around the whole theme of bootstrapping your online business, which is something that is going to be increasingly necessary for women as with the fallout from the economy. Women are going to find themselves without recourse. They're going to have to create their own business. Kirsten, full disclosure, Kirsten, I have known since she was a baby because she's a cousin of mine. And in 2014, I saw her starting to go through this journey. Little did I realize that she was actually creating a template for what women are going to need now in 2020. So just a little bit of information about Kirsten. Kirsten is, her company is called DigitalSmith Inc. And she's an information professional based in the traditional territory of the Algonquin people in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. And Kirsten found herself after a 24-year career as an award-winning news librarian and editorial researcher with an employer who decided it was time for her to go into business for herself as a researcher for hire. Kirsten specializes in Canadian federal access to information requests and government information, and her clients are diverse, coming from news, media, entertainment, law, and business. Kirsten has an honors BA in political science and history from Carleton University and a master's of library and information science from Western University. And she and her family, one human, two cats, live in a small acreage in rural Ottawa that I've often seen you refer to as the Shire.
True.
So Kirsten, blah, 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 never me. So just before we get into how it came about, tell me more about the business, tell me more about your business.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
So as an information professional, hello everyone. So an information professional is one of these really vague terms that most people just can't grasp. But it can encompass anything to do with information related industries. So I come out of the library stream. I'm a professional librarian by training. I worked as a news librarian for a long, long time.
Now, the organization you were working with was one of the largest news organizations in Canada, was it?
Correct. Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's all over my social profiles if you want to look me up on LinkedIn and whatnot. So I worked for Post Media, which is the company that owns the Vancouver Sun out in your region and has newspapers. And at the time, used to have a very large parliamentary bureau. And so I worked in the parliamentary bureau covering federal politics. I organized a small library collection. I did access to information requests, and I was doing research for reporters. So it was great because I was a fact checker long before fact checking was trendy.
Yeah.
I was making sure that what you read in your morning newspaper was hopefully accurate if it was a story that came out of our bureau. So every day was different. Every question, I could be doing. We had sports reporters and entertainment reporters, so I could be doing this really in-depth analysis about water policy 1 hour, and then the next hour I have to find profiles of Brad Pitt for our entertainment guy because he's got an interview. So it was always
fascinating.
So much fun. Yeah, it was always great fun. But so that's my niche as an information professional. But if you're working with information in any way, you could be doing IT and knowledge management. You could be a technical writer. You could be a content creator of some sort. A ghostwriter that turns academic prose, shall we say, into something readable for publication. You could be. I'm just trying to think of what are some of the other fields that we have. Private investigators, they deal with information, very similar to what I do as basically a reference librarian. All sorts of these people all deal with information in their chosen professions. So that's kind of the blanket coverage. A prospect grant writer, you wouldn't think of that, but again, they've got to cull stuff together from various sources and come up with some final product. For me, what I tell clients is I can make your job easier and I can save you time and money because there are so many different diverse sources now to have to look at when you're trying to find information. If you're, doing a pitch to a client, or if you're preparing a brief for some kind of parliamentary committee or city hall, you need to be able to be confident that what you've got is useful to you and is relevant and is the most reliable. And that's where people like me come in.
And I would think also covers the spectrum of information out there, because if you are pitching something or you're attempting to get something off the ground, you do not want somebody coming in and going, oh, but what about this? You want to know
Exactly.
that all
Yeah.
the bases are covered.
Yeah, yeah, the worst thing is, I mean, I like to say that my main competition is ignorance and, page 2 of a Google search. Because how many people actually go to the second page of a Google search?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
there's so much more out there that's in archives, that's in libraries, that industry associations have. I did something for a marketing company a number of years ago. She called me up on a Sunday and she's like, so I have to do a pitch for this community interest association, like a BIA. I need to know the latest research on traffic calming. I said, what? Traffic calming, like speed bumps and narrow lanes. And I'm like, okay, good. I'm on it. So there is an association for everything, including traffic management. So I found that association, and then I dug around into their website, and I found out what their journals were, and off I went. So I was able to actually find some research for her on a Sunday afternoon, so that she could get her brief ready for Monday morning. So you just never know. So as basically a reference librarian for hire, I can take the methodology I know to how to look for information and evaluate its trustworthiness and apply it to almost any subject.
Oh, and that is so direly needed nowadays. But I was actually just talking to someone yesterday about you and that whole thing. And in this day and age of disinformation and alternate facts, the money is not even finding out what the truth is. The money is being able to throw out those alternate facts. And so when it comes to the money, who are your clients and how do they find you?
So most of my clients have come from referrals from former colleagues in journalism, because journalists are fabulous networkers by virtue of having to talk to people all day long. Some of the journalists that I know have Rolodexes that are this thick, and they still use the old paper Rolodex in addition to all the contacts on their phone. So I was very fortunate in that a number of colleagues, some of whom I hadn't worked with for 10 or 15 years, when they heard through the grapevine that I was on the market, they came to me and said, hey, I know that you have something that we can use. So that was great. What I have found is, so my first clients were in the news media business, and some of my most valuable clients are still in that field. But what I found is that the skills of being able to find, evaluate, and analyze information apply anywhere. So that's why I've worked with business investors, I've worked with corporations, I've worked for not-for-profits. I mean, I worked for a couple of little tiny groups that were looking for grants and funding and things like that. So they come from referrals. They a little bit come from very passive marketing. I mean, if you go and look at my blog at DigitalSmith, I mostly just rant and complain about the Federal Access to Information Act, but
I saw that.
Which is a bit of a niche in itself, but it's a piece of legislation that gives every single Canadian the right to ask for information from the government.
I did see.
Check.
Oh, okay.
And it's such a complicated process.
Yes, yes.
They've made it this open and transparent government, and all of the governments that have preceded it say one thing and do another. So,
well, I noticed that on your website, in your list of offerings, that was your third item.
Yeah.
And for me, as a non-governmental, non-news agency kind of person, I'm looking at it from, I saw that as like, wow, that to me stood out as one of the most valuable things you can do, because you know how to navigate and get in there. For somebody who needs to get information via freedom of information, you know the path, you know how to do it.
Absolutely. And there's so much useful information that the government produces. They produce research studies. So even if you're thinking in the context of the pandemic, if you're in any way associated with, the long-term care field, or you're in a biotech and biopharm, and you're trying to figure out what the government is looking at or is interested in, or where they might be evolving policy, you want to submit ATIP requests. But the process is convoluted. The timeframes are terrible. Negotiation, whining, is often required, and you've got to track everything mercilessly. So it's
so not for the newbie and that kind of thing. You want somebody who knows what they're doing.
It's not really for the faint of heart. And if you're, a policy analyst for a big company doing government relations, you've got a whole lot of files that you're juggling. So the fact that, the government department has missed their deadline, it could be weeks before you even notice that kind of thing. And yet it matters to be able to follow up. So by having that as one of my offerings, I provide two things to a company or to an industry group anonymity, because even though they claim it doesn't matter who's submitting the request, it matters. The government flags. They I can't remember if it's called, I think it might be called red flagging. If you're a media reporter, they know it, and they flag your request as such, even though theoretically they're not supposed to. So if you're a big company and you've got a vested interest in this particular thing that you're ATIPing, well, there's a good chance that is, even though it's not supposed to, it's going to have an impact on what documents they release to you and what things they block out.
Interesting.
So
it's freedom of information to a degree.
Absolutely.
Jesus.
Yeah, nothing is ever really government information. Even though we pay for it with our tax dollars, it should be more transparent. It should be more open. We should be able to understand, particularly after the fact, after they've tabled a bill or they've announced a policy, how did they get there? What decision process did they go through? Why can't we see that?
And what were their findings?
Yeah.
Because we as citizens want to know, which kind of leads me to a segue on, if there was the ability to search for freedom of information search on what is the impact on women in their, economically from this COVID pandemic, I would love to see what they're finding about that. And that brings me to the whole thing of women suddenly finding themselves, like you did, like so many of us have, and like millions are finding right now, out of work and needing to ultimately bootstrap an online business for themselves, which is what you did.
It's so interesting. I never really thought of myself as an online business until you invited me to participate in this, because I just thought, I'm a consultant, and the only way I really have to advertise these days is online, because my clients can be anywhere.
Yeah.
So.
And all your communications are happening with them, and payments are happening. There's no face-to-face stuff. You're an online business. And that is something that I think a lot of professionals, women and men, are not realizing, that this, if you've been, like you were, 24 years with a company or a government organization or wherever you were employed, and you're suddenly no longer employed, it sometimes is a bit of a leap to come to the conclusion that, I should just be going freelance and starting this thing online. How did you even come to that?
Well, I was in my late 40s when the company downsized and told me that they were laying me off. I live in Ottawa, which is a beautiful city, but to get work in government or even in the public library system here, I need to be bilingual. And sadly, I am not. I didn't grow up in Ottawa, although I've lived here now for a good long while, but as you know, because we're cousins, I was a military brat, so I moved all over the country, and in fact lived in Europe a couple of times when I was too small to appreciate it. Still bitter about that. But I grew up with 10 different education systems, never really tried to learn French, didn't really stick with it. So my job prospects in Ottawa as a woman of a certain age with a certain skill set, incredibly limited. So my options were to completely pivot into something absolutely brand new, or make a business for myself. And because I had so many people, because when you go to a layoff party, you say nice things about the people being laid off. So all of these people gave me this encouragement that I would be able to go into business for myself, and I would be able to make a go of it, because my skill set was so valuable that I went, that's what I will do. And it didn't even occur to me that I needed to have a more structured plan, because coming from a newsroom, it was absolutely common in that ecosystem for the journalists to freelance. So that whole concept of being a freelancer, of identifying as a freelancer, was a very natural step, just ever so slightly to the left for me, as opposed to a really big pivot, which would have been my job application to Costco, and I didn't even get an interview. I'm still bitter about it. They
don't know what they're missing.
Exactly. They didn't know what.
Screw them.
So because half of my friends in the newsroom did freelance work on the side. So I'm like, so what did you do? Did you incorporate whatever? I just asked them a couple of questions, and most of them were like, no, I just registered as a sole proprietor. That way I can write off, part of my house and part of my hydro bill. And I'm like, okay, cool. That's what I'll do. So I decided, okay, I'm gonna go into business for myself. I'm going to become a freelancer. I'm going to, I go into the Ontario government website, and I'm like, $68, I can become a sole proprietor. I will register under my name of Kirsten J. Smith. instead of an actual company name. So don't do that, people. Don't
Okay.
think about it for a minute. So I registered, so technically my sole proprietorship is my name. And about 6 months in, when I realized I wanted to use the brand of DigitalSmith, I couldn't make the change because my business bank account and my business HST number are all linked to my sole proprietorship, Kirsten Smith.
Yeah.
So I would have had to, terminate all of those, start again. I already had clients. It was just a mess. So for a long time, I was describing myself, my company was Kirsten Smith, but my website is digitalsmith.ca, or my brand is. And now I realized that I was being very anal about that distinction, and it really doesn't make a difference. So that's how I ended up the way
almost
I am.
an accidental entrepreneur.
Very much, very much so. It was so interesting that that first spring I was attending a lot of networking events at BIAs and chambers. I joined a networking group, BNI. I don't know if people have heard of it, Business Network International, because I wanted to learn networking skills. I mean, I am by nature an introvert, and I was a librarian in a one-person library. So yeah, I'm not exactly the most extroverted, skilled communicator that I know. Let's put it that way. But so I wanted to make sure that I had at least those groundings. So I did invest in BNI for a couple of years. It was really valuable for me personally to develop communication skills and the concept of network marketing and things like that. It didn't necessarily bring me a lot of clients, but I would recommend if someone is going into business, you can get invited to a meeting here and there. So it may actually be an interesting experience for
So don't just use it as potential lead generation, use it as honing your skills for business networking.
Yeah. That's what I did for sure. I know that, every chapter has got like a real estate agent, an accountant, a really successful chapter will have about a dozen different trades because they can all give each other referrals.
Yeah.
So that works really well. I found for me, because most of them were other small businesses, it wasn't necessarily great for, as I said, for lead generation, but I really got a lot out of it as far as learning a little bit about business and how to talk to people.
Yeah.
How to do an elevator pitch.
Yeah, so important. So 6 years down the road, DigitalSmith has grown, and looking back, what were the big lessons learned that you can look at and go like, damn, I wish I'd known better about that, or I wish I'd known something, or I wish somebody had told me, or I would not do it that way again.
Oh, so including registering my sole proprietorship under my name. Don't do that. I knew I wanted to use DigitalSmith at the time because I liked it. I had test marketed it with my friends and people in journalism, and they thought, oh, that's so smart. Yeah. The blacksmith, the digital. Yeah, that's brilliant. So you should have registered as that. The other thing that I would suggest, if you can, particularly if you're laid off, if you're involuntarily separated from a career or a workplace that you really were invested in and you're emotionally attached to, if you can afford to take a month off to watch trash on Netflix, take a month off and watch trash on Netflix. I didn't do that. I didn't give myself time to be mad about being laid off, and I didn't give myself time to be sad about being laid off. And I regret that I didn't spend a little bit of time, because I could have maybe come at my career with an actual set of, here's a plan, you should do this. Instead, I'm like, oh, I can't be unemployed. I must go and work. All of these people said they would hire me. I must follow up immediately. So I rushed into business without actually giving myself a chance to go, oh, okay, so that happened. I have feelings about it. I should feel my feelings. And I know that had a bit of an impact and has left me angry for a long time. I also had some, lawyers had to get involved, and we took several months to come to a resolution that worked for both sides. So,
and as we mentioned earlier before we went live, this is a story. This is an untold story that way more women over 50 undergo and then are nailed down with a non-disclosure agreement. So it kind of is under the radar, but a lot of women are shown the door in their 50s. And have to reinvent themselves.
Yeah, and it's not like we're probably the high earners in the various companies. Far from it, as a matter of fact. So I don't know why we are such an expendable demographic, but there you go.
So,
So that was definitely something I would suggest you do if you can.
Yeah.
The rest.
Yeah.
The other thing I didn't do, and I still don't really have to this date, is I don't have a 1 and a 3 and a 5-year vision. My goal was I need to be able to earn, ideally fully replace my income from my salary job, and I need to do that for about 10 years until I can afford to retire. 10 or 15, it was 15 years, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And that was as vaguely defined as my goal was, which probably in hindsight should have been better. I'm now 6 years into it, and because I've managed to keep enough steady clients that I have been able to, earn enough to pay the bills. I'm enjoying being able to, work a day if I want to and not work another day if I don't want to. That I don't spend a lot of time in deep reflection about where I'm going, and I probably should.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Is there any one area of your business where you would either like, or even in hindsight have liked to have had a little more, say, mentorship or guidance or recommendations?
Like I don't have a leads list, for example. I've only just reactivated my MailChimp account,
mm-hmm.
and I've got stuck in the settings part. So the fact that I am being a little bit more active in my blog, which is a very passive form of marketing. I admit that I don't have like a freemium or another kind of a
lead
collateral.
magnet.
Yeah, that on my website, for example, I could make a ATIP cheat sheet, but then again, I don't want to give away all my secrets because I want them to hire me to do it. So,
do you know what? It occurs to me while we're sitting here talking, what you need to have on your website is maybe not from this exact flip, but a conversation with somebody where you're explaining the whole thing of the freedom of information, how tricky that is, and having somebody who knows what they're doing do it for you is going to make sure you save time, money, and it gets done right.
Yeah, I probably should. I mean, I've got old blog posts that talk about it, and I've done like half-day training sessions on it. So I do have a couple of slides I could probably put up as a teaser, but I don't have one of those things to get people to opt into a leads list. So that's an area.
It's also like really make them feel like, oh shit, I need her. That's crucial.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. Sorry about that. Don't know sorry, not sure what's going on there. Anyway.
So
that was, we were talking about that is one area where I know I
marketing, lead generation, that kind of thing.
And, lead generation, and I foolishly thought I would have this. You know how people have talked about the pandemic and how they're getting all these extra things done, and they're in these amazing personal development, and they're getting new skills, and they're learning to bake bread, and I have not done any of that. I did a couple of jigsaw puzzles early on, but
there has been a shit ton of that. What is it? The bread that everybody's making. What is that about?
I don't know. I mean, I did have, because coincidentally, just before the pandemic began, I had one of my regular clients passed away, and another regular client cut my hours. So I thought, I need, for the first time in my business, and that was literally, I got laid off in February of 2014. So this was February of 2020, and I'm like, all right, it's a good time to actually sit down and maybe think about doing a plan. And I've got to find some new clients, and I haven't had to really go look for clients for a long time because I have been so blessed with referrals. And then the pandemic hit, and I'm like, what do I do now? How do I go and find new clients when I can't get in their faces?
And in addition to the whole thing of, like you say, we're not all out there learning all these new skills, let alone baking bread. There's, at this point, I'm actually getting a lot of people contacting me and saying, are you in just a state of kind of stasis and malaise where you're just kind of, you've lost all your energy and your oomph? And I've given it a lot of thought. I think it's a really challenging time because we're not in full-blown emergency anymore.
No.
But we're not normal. And
Exactly.
if you think about it a little bit, there's probably an economic, let's not say disaster, but an economic time bomb kind of teetering on the precipice out there, and government funding is just kind of keeping it up in the air. It's a hard time to stay motivated and productive.
It really is. I definitely, I think I definitely had that issue in March. Like, I got through a couple of deadlines because I had them. and I was doing some stuff on, almost on autopilot. There's some processes, and sometimes when you're reviewing documents, you don't necessarily have to think a whole lot about them. But doing some of that creative stuff, trying to figure out ways to actually network and find new clients. I was going to here. I'm in Ottawa, so I have access to Library and Archives Canada, our national library and archives, and they have a page with freelance researchers. They don't endorse any of them, but it's like, if you can't come to Ottawa, here are some people on the ground who you could hire. And that was going to be one of my my main goals for Q1 of 2020.
Yep.
I still haven't done it because the library's been closed, so I've been kind of thinking, well, what's the point? And I really need to get on that list because things are beginning to reopen. Someday soon, hopefully, we'll be able to get into a government facility. It may not be in the fall, I'm not sure.
But in the meantime, like you say, those remote customers who need that freelancer.
Yeah.
We've made a great leap during this pandemic into from the mindset of like, oh, the internet's for Facebook and email too. People are very comfortable now taking lessons and classes and communicating via the internet. So you want to be that face, that name out there that's like, yeah, I can help you. We never have to meet, but I will satisfy your need.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Do you have, so in my professional association, the Association of Independent Information Professionals, we often have a discussion as to whether or not freelancer has negative connotations or suggests it's not really your business, but it's your side hustle.
Yeah, it definitely does. And freelancers almost come in a lot of people's minds who are industry, and particularly online, they think freelancer, they think Fiverr and Upwork.
Yeah.
Which is not most of those people's main gig. Like when you go and actually look, because I've hired a number of companies and individuals on Upwork. When you look at that, that's not, it's an offshoot. It's a side gig of their main business. So they're freelancers. It does have less authority.
I was just wondering if like other people who belong to your business community and whatnot, if it's a negative connotation or not. Because I think now with everybody working from home, or very few people, I think this whole idea that you can actually get a whole bunch of stuff accomplished from your home office or remotely from wherever, you don't have to be on site in an office, is going to be a really radical shift.
Oh, huge.
The way employment, work happens in the next year.
Absolutely.
I've got, bureaucrat friends who are talking about possibly never going back to their office other than maybe 1 or 2 days a month for, the odd meeting, which is really kind of odd.
It's been a revolution.
Yeah.
That we did not see. Really the whole thing of like online working, it has been coming for decades. But this last 3 months has just lurched us so far forward. It's incredible.
Yeah. Like, I don't know what the situation is in BC, but here in Ontario, they've been talking about virtual healthcare and being able to, have a remote meeting with the doctor for literally decades. Yeah. And now all of a sudden in 3 months, they've sorted out the big stumbling block was how do we bill, how will the doctors be able to bill for it? And now miraculously they figured it out.
Figure it out, kids. Just like, how's a restaurant going to survive if customers can't come to it? Figure it out. Get innovative. I guess the need wasn't great enough up to this point.
I guess we needed a global pandemic for something like this.
Yes. Light the fire under us. So your advice, somebody like yourself who's finding themselves out there, and beyond, you said, give yourself some time, sort it out, get your head on right.
What else would I say? Decide what size of your business is going to be. I went to one, like I said early on, I went to a bunch of different BIA and networking events that were about going into business for yourself or opening your small business. And I went to one that talked about health and safety and a lot of the processes required to actually have employees. And I realized right then and there, I never want to have an employee. Oh my God, the paperwork involved, the administration hassle, the extra, no. So figure out what size of business you want. Is it something, figure out whether or not you want to be one of these work 60-hour-a-week people who, who's making massive oodles of money and being a public speaker because that's where the money supposedly is, although I'm curious to see what happens to that whole industry.
Yeah.
Now that everyone has spent 3 months basically giving it away on video talks, I'll be really interested to see if the people can can ask like thousands and thousands of dollars for an hour-long speech at a conference.
Mm-hmm.
Be very curious about that. But what size of business you want? One of the things I did decide early on was that, you know what, I don't really want to work 40 hours a week anymore. And I was in journalism, so I was working more than 40 hours a week without actually getting a whole lot of overtime. So, I can deal with those really tight deadlines because
Mm-hmm.
that was my career.
Mm-hmm.
But I also kind of like the luxury of being able to space stuff out and kind of think,
So kind of sort that out ahead of time. What do I want this to look like in my life?
what do I want it to look like? What do I want me to look like? I mean, after, quarter of a century of driving into the city, a commute that ranged from 30 minutes at one point, but is now about 70 minutes. I'm really excited to not have to drive into the city.
Yeah.
And I had one client that liked to see me on site, and I was going once a week. And I do miss actually personal interaction with that particular group of clients because
Mm-hmm.
you got a lot accomplished as far as brainstorming,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but I'm assuming that's just gone forever. That client will probably never ever want me back, actually physically on site.
Yeah.
And from my point of view, is that the best way to spend my time? So I definitely like the flexibility
Mm-hmm.
of being self-employed. It would make it really hard to go back to a 9-to-5 job, I think.
I was thinking, I wonder if you've ever over the years thought, oh, I'd rather just be an employee. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't have said it with that tone of voice. I think I'd rather be an employee than have my own business.
Not. I would entertain the idea if it was something that worked with my skill set and was probably short term, like a maternity contract or maternity leave fill in or something like that, where I could possibly really challenge the brain for a little bit. But other than that, not really. I mean, I'm getting to the point where I can see that magic year of 62 when I can start drawing my pension without too much penalty.
Yeah.
That's getting ever closer. So if I could get there, if we can just, figure it out and get there with a reasonable degree of comfort,
Mm-hmm.
and if I can continue to do that with, kind of the 25 hours a week, I'm all right with that. The one thing I would say, just to go back to a couple of questions ago about things that I didn't know then that I'm so glad I know now.
Yeah.
You know how you go into work and you figure I've done my 40 hours for the day when you're a salaried employee?
Yeah.
Life is just not like that. Like if you think you're going to do 40 hours of billable client work and that's a week, that's not a week. You're doing 20, maybe 20.
I was going to say, are you around 50% of billable
And
hours?
then the rest of the time you're working on your content marketing. You're working on, you're working on your networking. You're working on your business development. You're dealing with your quarterly taxes and doing paperwork. I mean, I knew very quickly that one of the things I didn't want to do was my own books. So I have an accountant. I also have FreshBooks, which deals with my invoicing and my tracking my project time.
Yeah.
Love it.
Knowing what to outsource, so important. Do not try to do it all yourself because unless you're going in, like one of the things I say to clients is, unless you're going into business of creating video or creating visuals or writing blog posts, you cannot afford the time to become like super master in that area. Get help and get on with what it is that you excel in.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just too easy to get bogged down in things. Like
there is so much to get bogged down in.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the whole MailChimp and trying to create my leads list. I have this little accountability group through my professional association. So they get together 3 times a week and they just sit on Zoom and they do their own work. They might have a little bit of a conversation and a brainstorm about something. Yep. For the most part, they're just working on their separate assignments. So I just kind of cavalierly said, I'm going to get MailChimp sorted out. So the next time you see me on the group, I'm going to have my leads list done. I haven't figured out how to update put my logo in there yet. So I haven't been back. So if any of them are watching this, I will come back, I promise.
Well, actually, I've got something I can share with you around that hopefully will leapfrog you forward. But anyways, I should let you go. Thank you so much for taking this time, Kirsten. It was really, really interesting talking to you and talking to somebody who accidentally ended up bootstrapping an online business and is still standing to tell the tale.
Still standing to love the tale. I really love it. I love the freedom of being able to, as I said, set my own hours and the challenge. And there's definitely so much to know and to learn, though. So if anyone who's watching is able to take one thing away from this and learn one thing, then hooray.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure there's lots of stuff, including mindset, and that you, after 6 years, you still feel that this is a worthwhile endeavor.
Oh yeah,
that's huge.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I'll be talking to you, and if anybody's got any questions or comments, drop them in the post below this, and I'll see you around, Kirsten. Great talking with you. Okay. Take care. Bye. Bye.